get straight into it. And if you're a local business person, we understand that you have a limited amount of time, so let's get right to it.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of things to pick and choose. I should be doing this, I should be doing that. But you used to, with your family, come out of home furnishings.
Right.
So you're able to bring a lot of those lessons to this podcast. What's one that you want to just mainly point out, hey, you know what, this really helped our home furnishings store?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing we ever did was simply tracking our customers, right? And that was the number one thing that was the eye-opener for everything to come beyond. And what I mean by that is we used to see a sales cycle where we would be in January and it would be high clearance items from the holiday. And then we would see close to Easter, we had a spring open house that we would do, and that was huge. And then we would have a Christmas open house, which was also huge, right? But the other times of the year, we saw these drastic drops in revenue and customers and all these other things. And without the knowledge of what was going on or even tracking anything, we really had no idea what we were dealing with, right? So we would go in there and I would ask the manager, I would say, hey, how many people came in today? I don't know. Okay, well, what's our average order today? I don't know. What's our average order normally? It's probably around, right? You hear all of these probablys. And what we started to understand was we needed some more information. If we know things are going to go down, we need to understand how bad they're going to get, right? So if you're a small business, and especially on the retail side, you're putting dollars out there for inventory. And if that inventory is sitting during those lulls, that's a problem. It's just sitting. It's not going anywhere. It's not turning, as we say in the business, right? So we had days where there would be 5 people that would walk through the door. And we would have days where 100 people would walk through the door. And those are completely different days, right? So if 5 people walk through the door, you're not breaking even at that day. I mean, you're paying overhead, you're paying if you have any staff. We had a manager, great person, but we were losing money, electricity, rent, all these different things. So that's not a really good scenario to be in. But without the information, we used to just make these decisions, and we would say, oh, well, let's have a furniture road show today, and we would have a company come in with a bunch of furniture, and it would be all over the place, and we would do 2 days of that. And that was great. People would come in and they'd buy furniture, and we'd have a slight uptick, and then it would go down. Then we would do a print open house where we had this gigantic truck show up, and we had all these different prints, and we would have a great 3-day event with that, and then it would go back down. And really what we started to understand was these are these small upticks, which are great, mind you. We had a ladies' night where all of the businesses around the area would partner up and they would do something special in each one of the retail shops, right? So you would have a map and you would go from store to store to store and people would buy, and we'd see a slight uptick in that. We would also do, we had on Thursday nights, there was a local art show where artists would come in and put their art in each one of the stores, and people would walk around the square and kind of see that. So all of these things boosted revenues, but at the end of the month, we didn't know where we were at, right? You'd have to get all the receipts in. You'd have to jump into QuickBooks and understand kind of where things were going. The problem was we had no data, right? So we had no data to understand how many customers had been in. We had no data for what our average order was, how many tickets had come through, any of that. And I know, again, I hate to keep bringing it up, but we talk about the funnel and awareness, and then we go to consideration, the next step down, right? So how many people are aware of us, but then how many will consider to come in and actually start to shop? If I don't understand how many people walk through my door, if I don't understand how many people have called my service business in a year, I can't get a feeling for how well we're doing. So that was the number one thing that completely changed how we approached things moving forward. Because honestly, imagine sitting in front of you 3 years of data that shows you where things were and how they've changed and whether they've gone up or down. And I'm not just talking about gross revenues, right? I am talking about average tickets. I am talking about all this stuff, right? And that to me was the number one marketing tactic I've ever done, is tracking that. And a lot of people out there probably sitting going, how do you do that? I can't do that. We're too busy, right? We were busy. There were many times, yes, we didn't have one person that we tracked, but in general, we pretty much got as many as we possibly could. We probably had a 95% success rate in what we were tracking. So it's a really good exercise to go through.
Any interesting February versus October, March versus July? I mean, just in your business, what happened with you that somebody else might say, gosh, I got that same thing?
It's the after the holiday lull, right? So you have the first 2 weeks of January are usually fine. It's the last 2 weeks of January into February. February is awful. And then you start to get into March and spring, and it's warming up if you're in a cold weather climate. So there are times of the year that are very difficult. We also noticed with the holiday, right? You'll notice Christmas trees and everything else coming out in September at this point, maybe even as early as August in some areas, which is pushing it a little bit, right? But sales start to creep up. Right. So when you get to December 15th, things start to die off again. Right. And that's because pretty much most people, unless you're like me, right, have done their shopping already and are done. So there are many ways to look at it. And then in the summer months, we also have an issue with local retail because a lot of people are traveling. They have children and they're traveling to different locations. So they're not in town. So you start to see a lull there as well. So there's all of this data that we really need to look at, and they probably understand this at this point because they've seen it through their own eyeballs. But when you put it to paper, when you put it to numbers, you start to understand, because our real goal of what we're trying to do every single year is just grow. Right? We want to grow, we want to sell more, we want to have more revenue, we want to have more customers. And if you can start to understand it wasn't the greatest year, but we're better off than we were last year. Or if you start to see a dip, right? So we're getting worse than we were last year, and then you see it the next year. There's something going on, and we need to pay attention to this. Without the data in your hands, you're in a world of hurt when those things start to happen.
All right. Average order.
Yep.
When you said that, all I could think was here at our radio and streaming video, I don't know what my average order is.
Right.
I couldn't even, I'm sure I would put an estimate on, the average advertiser, and that I would be completely off.
Right. Yeah, it's the average order is really interesting because most people don't know what it is. And it's very simple to understand. Take the tickets that come in, the receipts from every single day, take them home, put them into a spreadsheet, and average them. That's all you have to do. Right? So if you sell, let's say, 10 items today or 10 people today, or you sell 100 people today, go back, put them into a spreadsheet, and then just average it out, and you'll see what your average order is for that day. That's great for the one day, but one day doesn't mean anything. It's not like, January 29th of this year is going to be the same as January 29th of next year. It just doesn't work that way. So what you need to do is take it every single day. So take those tickets, those receipts when you go home, throw them into an Excel file or a Google Sheet, and start to understand, here's my average ticket today, my average ticket tomorrow, my average ticket the day after, and then get for January or February, get it for the month, and then get it for the year. Because those are three numbers that are going to make sense to you, right? So if your average ticket, and let's just say it's simple here, right? Let's say it's $50 for January, but in December, it's $150. You know how things are changing. So is there something that we can do in January that's going to elevate that average ticket, right? And there's many things that we can do, right? And we can get into how consumers behave. I mean, we can go into a grocery store and I can tell you the millions of things that they're doing to influence how you're purchasing. Right?
I can't imagine how amazing that would be to most of the people listening to this podcast, and completely annoying to people that aren't owning their own local businesses.
Right.
Like walking around, you see that can of tomatoes? See how they're pricing it? Do you see that label? Do you see, I'm sure you have all of that running through your head.
Well, here, let me give you 5 simple examples. You ready? You walk into a grocery store. How easy is it to get to the milk? It's impossible, isn't it? It's all the way in the back. There's a reason for that. That roughly 80% of the purchases that you're going, I'm just going for milk. 80% of the purchases you make are impulse buys when you go to buy milk, right? You walk in, you have to go maybe to the right or to the left, however the store is set up, but you end up going around what's called a racetrack. And the first thing that you're going to see is the florist because it smells pretty, it looks pretty, right? It stimulates the appetite of the individual. Then you go into the produce, right? So you have vegetables and fruit, which are bright colored. You have the prepared meals, which are continuing to put, the smell out. We're getting you hungry as you go around it, right? And then once we get you into the inside aisles is where the high ticket items are. Those are the things that we're making more money on. So you talk about, canned vegetables or whatever. We're making more money there than we are on the outside, but we're training you as we're getting you around there. Now it sounds bad, but it's science, right? And it's one of those things we've done tons and tons of research on this, but whether you're holding a basket, you're not grabbing anything at all, you have a cart, or do you ever wonder why the Costco carts are so big? There's a reason for it. Because you buy more, right? One of the things that we used to do in our store is we would hand people baskets, right? Little baskets that they could walk around the store. Now it's a home decor shop, right? What do you think went in the baskets? Little small things that they saw that they normally wouldn't pick up because they'd be a pain to carry around the store as they're shopping, right? We'd give them a basket and sales went up. Our average ticket went up just by offering baskets.
He's Matt Hansen. Some of you folks are listening on my radio and TV station, so I got to reintroduce. This is Mastering Local Marketing Podcast. I want to go back to that.
Sure.
All right. So, you get a number of people that walk in. Say you start tracking 100, 200, 300, whatever. You've got retail. Some folks are selling B2B,
sure,
and they'll get a call, and then they won't get a call back. But did you have any idea of basically, you guys know the funnel, it's awareness, consideration, and then conversion or
Simple.
Close, whatever.
Right.
Let's use conversion. So did you have any idea what your conversion rate was?
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt, we knew exactly how many people were buying every single day, right? So, again, we went back and tracked it for the day. We tracked it for the entire month, the average, and we tracked it for the entire year. So we knew a percentage of certain people that would walk in the door. We knew what percentage would buy from us. And
what was that?
You know what? I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was probably around 35%. All right. So the average is roughly around 70% of people that will walk into your retail business will not buy something, right? And that's a small business.
Is that still expanding the funnel?
It's, the more people you bring in, the more things you're going to sell, right? The more tickets you're going to get in, the more, it's just kind of how it goes.
No, but if
right?
they walk out, would you consider that a successful increasing the funnel and an awareness? Or is it just like, well, we'll probably never see them again?
No, I think it's the number one the hardest thing to do in small business is to get somebody to contact you the first time, right? So to make the phone call, to actually walk in the door. And you hear this all the time. I never knew you were here. I hate that saying, right? It's like saying I'm the best kept marketing secret ever. It's like that's horrible to say, right? So you want people to know who you are. You do not want people to walk in and go, I never knew you were here, because obviously that's an awareness issue at that point. And they've just kind of stumbled upon you. But the more people that we drive in to that store, the simple math is going to work, right? So if you have 10 people that walk in that day, 3 people are going to buy. If you have 100 people walk in, 30 people are going to buy. And if your average ticket is $50, that's a significant difference in dollars, right?
How do you bring that average ticket up?
Oh, that's a fun way, right? So we talked about the baskets that we had, but I would say, I think the number was 17% of all of our sales happened at the counter. So what we would do is we would put these little things next to the counter, whether it was little like potpourri or candles. Like we used to have these tea light candles, and they were battery operated, and they cost you nothing. And we would put them right next to the checkout, and people would pick 4 or 5 of those things up. And Would we have sold those otherwise? No, of course not, right?
So at the register is 17% of your purchase. And so was there any upselling or anything?
Yeah, I mean, we would talk to them and say, what are you looking to do? I mean, we dealt with a lot of decorators and things, so there's always that conversation, and that's why we had the manager who was really well versed in decorating and design. But we would say, oh, you got that piece, which we all had our own favorites in the store, but did you see the other piece? Because we carried things that were one item or two items. Nobody else, once they were gone, nobody else could get them because we wouldn't buy them in bulk. So what we would see is, they were buying something and we'd say, hey, did you see the matching print for that over in the corner? And they'd say no, and we'd walk them over and they're like, oh, I've got to get that as well. So it was just a conversation of how are you using it. The tea lights were a perfect example, right? Little candles that go in things. Especially during the holidays, we would have different ornaments, right? We would have these glass snowflake ornaments or wine toppers that would sit there, and those things, they cost us $1 and we'd sell them for $5. I mean, they were just little upsells that you'd have. So it was a conversation and really kind of talking with them. I mean, we weren't pushing it on them, but we were providing them complimentary items that would go along with what they were currently buying.
Matt Hansen and Jim Deedlow on Mastering Local Marketing podcast. So to sum it up today, the tracking is something that no one wants to do because that is not income generating,
right.
Directly income generating. You're basically counting, who is a possible customer, who actually bought, how much they bought, all of that stuff. So at some point, your local business person who is like your mom or is like me here or anybody listening to the podcast, they're like, man, I don't have time for that. How do you convince them to at least start understanding their customer?
Yeah. If I told you that your business went up by 10% last year, that your average ticket went up by 15%, that you drove, 200 more customers through the door last year, you wouldn't be interested in that? I know I would, right? So it really just comes down to tracking three things. The number of people that either call you or come into your store, right? And people are like, I don't have time to track all of that. Use a simple door counter if you need to, right? Every time somebody walks by it, the laser triggers a count. We actually had our manager, he would count it. He had a little piece of paper next to the register, and every time that chime went off on the door, he ticked it, right? Like you just put a little check mark on there. And at the end of the day, we would count them up, and there'd be 75 people that walked through the door, right? So we knew how many people walked in just by doing something as archaic as that, literally taking pen to paper. Then we take the receipts at the end of the day, right? Which does not take any time out of your day where you're actually selling items.
That'd be number two.
That'd be number two, right? Understanding how many orders you had that day, whether it's a service business or a retail business, whether it's a restaurant, doesn't matter. How many tickets came through that door on that day? And then you can measure that as you go through the year, the month, whatever it may be. And then what is that average ticket? So at the end of the year, you get 365 days of data. And then you start doing it the next year and you compare it. And you'll start to realize whether or not you are growing or you are not growing. I get it that you're probably looking at revenue, but maybe you're selling more product or higher price product to less customers, right? So we used to joke all the time that we would sell things like candles and all these little small things at $5 a piece or $3 a piece, and that's never going to make us retire, right? But we would sell a $500, a $1,500 piece of furniture. I would much rather sell those things than the small things because it takes so much longer to sell that, right? And that's what we started to understand is our average ticket was, at that point, when we started tracking, was $38. When we started doing different things, we got it up to $65, which is great for us in that capacity because we knew if we continue to drive the numbers, we knew where we were going to be at the end of the year. It's X number of customers times the average order. We know where that revenue is. How do we manipulate? So you can look at each one of those numbers that you're tracking. whether it's the number that walk through the door. If I increase that, I know that the rest of them are going to get higher, right? I know that the number of tickets are going to go up, and I'm going to get more revenue. If the number of people stay the same walking in the door and the number of tickets go up, I know my revenue is going to go up as well. If the number of people walking in the door, the number of tickets stay the same, but my average order goes up, my revenue goes up as well. So there's 3 areas that you can actually drive your revenues up just by doing a simple calculation every single year.
You guys got that? That was actually General Business 101 there. But to summarize this, pretty easy tracking, especially if you have retail. But honestly, it could even be some sort of an online business do the same thing.
Right.
Number of people contacting you is 1. All right, how's this going? How do I get them out of the funnel and all that? Number 2 is how many orders in a day or a week or a month or whatever, depending on what your sales time frame is.
Yeah.
And then, what is the average ticket of those orders? And you can even do this if you are a business that makes like 1 sale a month.
Right.
And you can still do that,
Sure.
but your time frame has to shift.
Sure.
And you got to go for a year versus a daily thing. All right, man.
Yeah.
Just like always, this is the Mastering Local Marketing Podcast. One thing that completely changed my business was today, and that is tracking. And we try to give you pretty much one thing every time. Don't forget, please check us out. We're on Apple and Spotify. And I knew we were going to YouTube, but I did not know that you just got us on iHeart.
I did. Yep. So you can find us on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, and YouTube. And, a lot of people have been reaching out on different platforms and saying hey and leaving us reviews. So I do want to give a shout out to the boys at Copper. They've been listening and learning a lot of things. So that's kind of fun. But
so who would that be?
Sure. It's the Honors College down at the Purdue University in West Lafayette. They've been listening with my son. So hello everyone down there, and keep on listening.
All right, guys. Until next time. See you later.